Hey everybody, it's Mr. S, your music teacher with a lesson via video, via movie. And this one is about the difference between sound and music. So this is for my 5th and 6th graders. So take out a piece of paper, have something to write with, like a pen or pencil, and you're just going to jot some notes as we go through this. And there'll be some important points to make sure we have written down. Your teacher may want to see those. And the first thing that we have to ask is this fundamental question: what's the difference between sound and music? Right? Because we've all heard sound, and I bet you if I asked you to write down right now what you think music is, you can if you want, I bet you there would be a number of different answers. It's one of the hardest things to answer. So first we're going to do is start with this guy. Looks like he's got a leaf. And let's listen to him play his leaf, and let's see if we can decide whether or not what he's playing is music. Well, I think that's music, and there's a reason why. It's going to take me a couple of slides to go through. And first of all, I would say it's definitely music because I can't play a leaf that well. So let's go to the next slide here, and let's talk about what is just sound. Well, any vibration that travels through the ear and gets to a human or an animal is a sound. So here's an example of a sound, and this is from a computer. Okay, that's just a sound. There's nothing really to... Okay, so how do we take a sound and make it into something musical? Well, we need to add some organization. Check this out. So that's literally all you have to do. You just add the layers to it, keep it organized, add this, add that, add the beat, and then you've got music. That's really the big difference. And so that's the most important definition to learn in this slide, is that any sound or group of sounds that are organized in time, that's music. So the tricky thing about different types of music is that what you're usually hearing is a lot of very, very different styles. So I'm going to play this first clip that, unless you play Halo or you've been to a gigantic church cathedral type thing, you've probably never heard this sound before. That is some very ancient vocal music called Gregorian chant, and for 1,000 years that was all the music that the church, the big Roman Catholic Church, allowed for 1,000 years. All right, what about this? So those are two very, very different sounds, right? Was there anything that was the same? There was a lot more that was different. And that's the whole point, you guys, is there are some things that are the same about the first clip and the second clip. So it might not seem to you that those two clips have anything in common, but indeed, there were some things that are the same. And that's kind of the whole point of this entire little video lecture is to teach you about the elements of music that are the same for both of those clips. So it might not seem to you that those two clips have anything in common, but indeed, there were some things that are the same. And that's kind of the whole point of this entire little video lecture is to teach you about the elements of music that are the same for both of those clips. Different between those two. And there was another clip on there, but I want to make sure I move forward. So here's the thing. Those two things they're related. They're not the same at all. One is the theme from Star Wars, which some of you know. And one is something really old called Gregorian chant that unless you play the Halo video game a lot, you probably never heard that before ever. Okay? So here's where the next words come in. And these are things to write down. The 5 elements of music. I've been at this music thing now 30 years. Some of you know me, some of you don't. But there are certain words that we can put in categories, and some of you've been studying this music with us here in this district for a long time. You already know this stuff. So all music, if we're going to call it music, the first thing it has to have is rhythm. We'll get into a little bit more of what that means in a second. The second thing that music has to have to be called music is pitch. High pitch, like singing high. Low pitch, singing low. I think of it like altitudes, like airplanes at 30,000 feet, high pitch. Airplanes coming in for a landing, say 10,000 feet, low pitch. The high notes on a piano, if you've ever messed around with the piano, and the low notes on the piano, even if you weren't even making music, you were just kind of plunking on the keys, you've heard the difference between high and low pitch. Certainly if you've been in the district, and you've even just sol me. Those are 2 different pitches. You guys know this already. The last couple of ones, it gets a little tricky. Dynamics, to me, that's what gives music its passion and its artistry and just makes it super cool. We'll get into that probably on the second video. Form, that's something that we want to start working with you, certainly at the 5th and 6th grade level. That's where music has like a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if I played more of that Star Wars clip, you would have heard certainly that. And then the last thing is called texture. And that's a couple of things. That is like what is playing and what is not. So in the Kyrie example, which that one probably sounded kind of awkward to you, that's because all those men were singing in Latin. That wasn't even English, you guys. So I might have heard that in church. Okay, that kind of a thing. But the Star Wars thing, you've got the brass in there, the woodwinds, percussion, strings. That's a completely different sound, okay? So these are the 5 elements, and we're going to break them down individually. The first and most fundamental element of music is rhythm. If you don't have a rhythm, you don't have music. You can just have a note and a note, but you have to put a rhythm to it, otherwise it's not music. And I've got some pictures here. I'm kind of spinning my mouse around here. This is Guitar Hero, and this is just one way of showing music notation. We all have a heartbeat, right? We beat that steady pulse. We all have a heartbeat. But there's 2 terms that I want to teach you today, if you haven't learned them already. One is tempo, and one is meter. So how fast is the music, and is it in certain groupings that helps us hear the beat and the way the beat is organized a little bit. But rhythm, again, is the most fundamental element of music. I mean, once you have a sound, you have to put a rhythm to it. So let's take a look at meter. Here in the middle, especially if you've played recorder or you've dealt with some music notation, you've probably seen some of this stuff before. You have seen these time signatures. You've seen 4/4, 2/4. We'll get to what these are in a little bit. But meter, or the time signature, this can be in music notation, but it doesn't have to be in notation to still be a meter. For example, the first meter is a simple one. 1, 2, 1, 2. So I'm going to play this recording. So that probably played too much of that, but that's an example of a 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. And I was trying to show you the numbers, and I was trying to also show you there's different ways to feel it. But that's one of the most fundamental kind of meters in music, because we have two, left, right. That was a piece of music called Maple Leaf Rag by Scott Joplin. He was playing it on piano. Very hard piece to play. Okay, so now let's listen to a 3. Something that we usually hear sometime during the holidays. But that 1, 2, that's a waltz, which actually is a dance. All right. Now the 4 is very similar to 2, because you guys know this because you've been to basic math class and you know that. So here's a 4. A subtle difference, but that's a 4. Okay. And now I had a student once, I believe at the beginning of this year, said, Mr. S, can I have something that's not a 2 or a 3? Indeed, you can. You can have odd or asymmetrical meters right here. Asymmetrical. That just means they're not the same. So listen to this piece of music and we'll try to find this out together. Okay, that's a piece called Blue Rondo a la Turk. That was written by either Dave Brubeck or Paul Desmond, either the saxophone player or the piano player. And that has a different feel to it, right? So instead of all being downbeats, it has that one. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4. It's in 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1. And because 9 is not even, right? You have to divide it into 2s and 3s. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then you know that 3 times 3 is 9, so you could also go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now that your head is probably exploding from all those crazy meters, let's move on to the next thing. All right, tempo. Tempo is simply the speed of music. That's why I have this speedometer here. And you can have a slow tempo, you can have a medium tempo, you can have a fast tempo, and you can have a crazy fast tempo. There are a lot of different examples that we could add here. And I will have them for you on the next slide. Okay, next we have the musical element of pitch, and think of it like an airplane. Pitching up, gains altitude, pitches down, comes in for a landing. Words like high versus low, and if you haven't heard Mariah Carey sing, yeah, we don't know how she does that. Ariana Grande can do that stuff too. They're called whistle notes. And so, high notes, right? She just sang them. Here's some low notes. tuba solo, right? And then keys, scales, melodies, harmonies, all those kinds of things. That's all contained in a lot of the music that you probably already listened to. You just now you know that there are words. But the last one on the bottom, I wanted to play a recording for you, which is the idea of timbre. And I know it looks like timber, but it's timbre, and that's just tone color. And this is what makes like a John Williams score, for example, for Star Wars or Raiders of the Lost Ark or whatever. He's kind of the genius of picking sort of exactly the right instrument for the right moment in a film. So that's a Bulgarian women's choir, all female choir, and I actually played that clip for two reasons: for you to hear a minor key, the melody, which and it's in a language that most of us don't understand. So I wanted you to just hear the harmonies and just how those voices work together. Okay, so that's pretty much it for pitch. Let's go to dynamics. So dynamics are they're the most expressive part of music, and we're going to do this in two different slides. We're going to look at dynamics and then also on the next slide accents. So you may not know it, but you've probably already known that this musical element is a thing, because most humans we love dynamics. We love things in music to kind of be unexpected, and kind of catch our attention. So they can be on a spectrum like this. You guys see down here and we have these little Italian words, pianissimo, forte, that kind of a thing. But this is part of a cue from a film, that there was a spinning object in space, and then it struck the spacecraft. And as the movie was developing, I tried to find the video. You're noticing that this object was spinning in the air, and you couldn't really tell where it was. As it got bigger and bigger, it was tumbling in outer space, and then it smacked into the side of a starship. And you'd have to be a Star Trek fan to even care about that. But here we go with some dynamics. Pretty cool moment in that film. All right, and then okay, accents. This is a clip from a band called Van Halen, and they were around, and they formed in the 70s, and then they were popular especially in the 80s and the 90s. So if you have any relatives that were alive back then, they might be familiar with this band. But when this song came out, I believe it was like 1995 or something like that, I thought this was a really great way to demonstrate to students the power of accents and what it does to kind of the energy of the music. And whether you like this music or not, that's not really the point. It's just to hear how these sort of micro explosions of sound kind of come in the texture and make it pretty exciting. and then the piece kind of goes, forward, and the rock singer starts singing about it. So if you like the sound of kind of heavy rock and heavy guitars and all that, if you're into that sort of thing, look up Van Halen and look up Right Now. Okay, now we're on to the last two slides here, the last two musical elements. And so let's start with form. There's so many different kinds of musical forms, and that would be a whole separate lecture to go into like all of the different forms. But there's one form that's really easy to hear because there's only 12 bars in it, and that's the 12-bar blues. So I'm going to play a clip of an old song from the 1950s by an artist by the name of Chuck Berry, and it was also used, if you've ever seen a movie called Back to the Future, that was a movie where Michael J. Fox played it. You probably haven't seen it. Your parents have, though. So here's 12-bar blues. And basically, you take that 12-bar structure, and then so the chord changes and the speed of the chords changing stays the same, and that is a form that it's used in a lot of popular music. Let's see, theme and variations. Again, that takes a while to get through. Verse, chorus. There's another one, and the march. But composers often use repeats to help establish the form, and so the music of Star Wars, I think, is a great example. So what I want to do is play the Star Wars You don't need to be able to identify all these forms, but I just wanted you to know that form is a thing, and that composers oftentimes use repeats to help. Form. So that first theme, we would call that A, and then you repeat A, and then as it fades out, we would call that the B section. And that's how form works, you guys. It's not rocket science. All right, the last one is the musical textures, and this is sometimes hard for students because of a lot of the music that we listen to is this one that's in the middle. Melody and accompaniment is what I call it. And that's like in most popular music, or any music that is popular in popular culture, there's usually a singer, right? So there'll be a singer singing a song. And then there will be other instruments and other things happening, or dancers, or a music video. But really, in terms of the musical texture, it's usually one person singing a song. That is the main melody. There might be a guitar solo, or, older school stuff had a saxophone or maybe even a piano solo. So I want to start with this one. This is an example of melody plus accompaniment.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among. Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars, and let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand.
Got it? So I played that one. Sorry, the lights are going out. very old school song, but you could hear the singer's voice and then the other instruments really clearly. So I know that song is absolutely not your cup of tea. But I use that as an example because you could hear it and hear what I'm talking about. Okay, so we have a telephone, right? A telephone, which they used to be held like this. Now they're like this and we text. But people used to talk to each other, and we would call and talk to each other on the phone. Now it's, we have powerful thumbs and we send messages. So from telephone, having to do with sound. So the phonic part, that's just the sound part. So mono, one. So you can have, and what I'm about to play for you guys, and some of you, if you're video game people, it might sound, you go, oh, this kind of sounds like the music from Halo. This is really, really ancient music. This, for about 1,000 years, this was the only music that the church, the big church, the Roman Catholic Church, capital T-H-E, this was the only music that the church allowed to be sung. And it was all sung by monks in the church, and it wasn't sung in English either. Ask your history class teacher to ask about the Protestant Reformation. That might come in middle school. But at any rate, 1,000 years of this monophonic music. And the mass would be all day. And I'm sure some of us have been to some church services that were, long, long services. And that was, well, and one could argue that might be part of the whole spiritual point, is to just sit in a church and listen to things and all of that. So this music is very expansive and lasts a very, very long time. So you can think of all, like in the Catholic Mass, for example, all the various, parts of the Mass, and this kind of music would be sung. Now, if you've ever been to a giant, like a really big church, like a really big cathedral-like church, I can imagine that this music must have sounded really beautiful in that kind of environment. So you have to consider the context of when this music was performed. Okay, and then the last thing is what we call polyphony, or it looks like polyphony here, but it's many sounds. Now, most students in my 30 years of teaching now don't like the sound of polyphonic music because it can be hard to listen to. So, if you remember pitch, I was talking about altitudes before. So if you can kind of, and this isn't an excruciatingly long clip, it's not that long of a clip, but listen for the high, the medium, the low sound. Like this. Now that music was originally played on a keyboard instrument called the pipe organ, but I thought that guitar version would be a little bit more exciting and a little bit more relevant to maybe some kind of music that you listen to. So you've got monophonic, melody and accompaniment, and polyphony. Those are the musical textures. There's also a thing about what instruments are playing and what aren't they, but you've got all the basics. All right. All right, so let's just do a quick review of what I call the 5 elements of music, because remember when we started this, music is a lot to a lot of people, and so it is my hope that with this slideshow and this video that you understand just a little bit better about how music is put together. And remember, the most important one is rhythm. If there's no rhythm, there's no music. The second one was pitch, thinking about the airplane, highs and lows, melody, harmony. Dynamics, loud and soft. These are the expressive qualities of music that, if I may be so bold, I think it's the thing that you probably like the most about music, is the expression, that it brings. Form, usually a song or a piece of music has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It can also just be as simple as, for film score music, where maybe the scene is, maybe it's an opening, foggy morning or something like that. Maybe the music just starts and ends. It doesn't necessarily have to have defined chunks. And then the last one is that texture piece, which is, monophonic, melody plus accompaniment, and polyphony. And all three of those are the basic layers and textures of music. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.